morning, both, and thank you very much for agreeing to do this for us. I know that John Eckersley's just said that he'd be terrified, so that's not really put you at your ease. But what did you say you were this morning? Sitting in the middle?
I said I was a thistle between two roses.
Yes. Let's make a start.
They weren't impressed either.
We've had a bit of guest wrangling to do this morning, Liz, haven't we, to get Ken to actually read the papers. You know, it's always quite a good idea and reassuring for me when your contributors read the articles. So we're going to have a look at hopefully 6 papers if we've got time. The first one is page 6 of the Times, corporate tax cuts shelved to help NHS. Liz, this was a proposal by Boris Johnson, which didn't seem to last very long. What was he proposing?
So the rate of corporation tax we have at the moment is 19%, and there was previously proposals that this would reduce down to 17%, but that's now been shelved. I think what you could say actually across the gamut of taxes, corporation tax maybe doesn't really pull its weight. I'm sure those in the room would be saying where they feel pain is more around the cost of employment, apprenticeship levy, national insurance, pay as you earn. I've got to remember corporation tax is a tax on profits, and arguably companies are going to be facing some challenges in terms of how they generate those profits with the landscape we've got, Brexit uncertainty. So arguably perhaps we need to keep it at 19% just to raise the revenues we would have done at 17%.
It's often, though, isn't it, a political football, something like corporation tax. It's something that politicians seem to bandy about as if it won't have much of an impact.
Yeah, so we were hearing in the radio this week that when corporation tax is reasonable, the take is higher. And that's something that I think is important. A company needs to be able to pay tax in the first place, so they have to be able to pay it, as well as, I'll put it willing in inverted commas. But it's a well-known fact that when the tax is too high, people run for the hills. So, and welfare organisations like Welfare People are better able to take steps that reduce their tax bill. So I was just looking while we were waiting to come in, for example, BT, it looks as if, I've just done very rough sums on this. BT after tax in 2019, according to the report, paid 2.2 billion, earned 2.2 billion after tax. So it sounds as if they've made paid $500 million in corporation tax. What happens to that corporation tax at any rate if its product's given away free? So the percentage headline is a bit of a red herring, isn't it? It's what's the take going to be?
The other story about corporation tax today is at the other end of the scale, isn't it, with Jeremy Corbyn admitting that he would potentially at some point increase corporation tax to 28%. So 28%. We've gone from a reduction from 19 to 17 up to 28. I mean, what impact would that have on businesses as far as you're aware?
Part of me would like to be paying 28% corporation tax. I don't know. I should defer to a tax expert on matters of tax.
I mean, I think in terms of the rate, what's important is we are globally competitive. Trump in the US has reduced corporation tax, or is reducing it down to 21%, so 19 still is. 28% isn't that much higher. We've got, in terms of all the justification for why isn't the rate being lowered, or why are there proposals to raise it, or even in the case of Lib Dems, proposals to put a penny on income tax, it's to pay for what's seen as much needed public spending. So the justifications in the papers here have been, and put forward by the various political parties, has been for investment in NHS. Whether companies will pay higher rates, that depends, what are their spending plans. If they've got to make investment in their infrastructure, then if that's allowable, they're not going to have the profits, the revenues won't be raised.
I sometimes wonder whether we are very much infantilized when it comes to tax. We want to spend more, we say, but we don't want to actually pay from our own pockets. It's not really a vote winner, though, is it, to be honest about what taxes would need to be to pay for everything that everyone says they want in terms of the health service, the standard of education. So how do we get round that?
Well, I think there was an interview with Angela Ledison recently where she was questioned. You're assuming that to pay for things, money has to come from somewhere. Well, yes, it does. None of us in business have that magic money tree at the bottom of the garden that just shakes out the investments funds needed for everything that is on all the stakeholder wish lists. So there are certainly needs to make sure we can pay and not just necessarily borrow to do so.
The third story is in the Times, page 9. Labour share plans will hit pensions hard. You did a bit of calculation. This is the idea that Labour would confiscate, as far as the Conservatives are concerned. They would take shares in large companies, and the idea is, on the headline, that there would be a benefit to the employees, but there would be an even bigger one to the Exchequer, Ken.
Yeah, I saw that as a stealth tax, and I think Employee Ownership did a great piece on it when it came out. So I think it's a good thing, anything that gives people ownership in the companies that they work for, even if they're not employee-owned. But again, I just did some back-of-the-fag packet sums, and you know, an organisation that falls into this would have more than 250 employees. After £500 a head, the rest of it goes where? It goes to the Exchequer. So I think it's another cynical tax. It sounds as if I'm a wee bit biased here. I'm not a very political person at all, but if you're going to have ownership, let's have it for the reasons of inclusion and ownership and all the boats going up when the tide comes in, not as a way of saying, look at that, you've got 500 quid, you know, and it's a token ownership and the rest coming to the Exchequer to make up for the loss of increase in the other taxes that aren't going to be collected.
Yeah, this is where you have to look behind the headline that you're presented with and look at the detail of what's really being proposed in the policy.
Indeed, so this is a policy that's come from the Shadow Chancellor, John McConnell, and actually what this article assumes is really that it's quoted companies for whom investors are largely institutional pension funds that are going to suffer. But actually there's a vast number of large private companies who don't have that institutional investors, but who will still, because they fall within the proposed threshold here of above 250 employees, would be mandated to make that 10% pool available. And what hasn't happened here is none of the industry experts in this room or the businesses in this room have been consulted over this proposal or asked, haven't we already got frameworks that help deliver this? Shouldn't we just be improving those?
The next story is in The Guardian, page 32. At London Stock Exchange, Ethical Index criticised for the inclusion of G4S. This is Human Rights Campaign is taking issue with G4S being included in this index because of controversies around the treatment of G4S's workers and also users. There's been a lot of emphasis in the last few years on sustainability in terms of not just environmental sustainability, but in terms of rooting out modern day slavery and the treatment of workers' labour conditions. But it's very difficult to quantify, isn't it, and follow it back all through the supply chains, which are immensely complex these days. So how useful are these ethical indices?
I think there's a lot of stuff goes on in the world that's brutal and we just don't know about it. I don't know if you saw the film that Ken Loach made, Sorry We Missed You. So there's a whole world of people doing work that we in this room don't know about, and I think it's right that it's outed. What the option is, there's another side to that coin. A lot of people who are in these bad positions that we think are bad positions, they don't want the boat rocked. It turns out when people go trying to make the lot better, they end up with no job and the work moves somewhere else. It's a real dilemma. I'm really glad that I've got the luxury of commenting on what politicians are doing and not doing, and I'm not the one having to do it, truth be told. But indices that hold themselves up to be good,
There are no easy answers for this.
No easy answer.
In Scotland, there's some work being done about another index of this sort, Liz.
Well, there has been a proposal, Project Heather, for a new Scottish stock exchange, which was proposed as an additional rather than alternative stock market for businesses that were vetted and committed and measured against their environmental, social governance responsibilities. I think that's stalling a little bit at present. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of momentum or perhaps funding behind it, which again, perhaps begs the question, are we asking for greenwash? Are we asking for substance? How much commitment is there to really make this happen? And I think if you ask around kind of employee-owned businesses, we don't talk so much about ESG, but there's lots of talk of P's, people and planet and purpose. So there's definitely good work being done. But you could ask, how does any business measure its success truly, tangibly, and up to scrutiny of any fact checker?
Onto the Telegraph business section, and millennials seeking a better work-life mix believe that self-employment is just the job, but the article says that they don't really understand the pressures involved in working for yourself. But in this room, there may be an answer, Ken. If not self-employment.
Employee ownership?
Maybe.
So we did feel the franchise industry used to talk about working for yourself but not on your own. And I think this is a great opportunity for young people who want to have engagement, who want to have a sense of ownership, who want to have a voice. One of the things that comes up, I was criticised for talking too much about the financial benefit in our company. It's always this time next year when we've stopped finding another good thing to do and there's profits and dividends to share. But I was told to not underestimate the value of having a voice, having a say, your ideas being an idea this morning and it's being sounded out this afternoon, and within a day or two something's happening. So it depends what the motivation for these children that were born at that time. Millennials. They knew I couldn't say millennials, incidentally. Just like I couldn't say I'm sorry and I'm wrong. But yeah, I still do think we need gung-ho people who are out there. So I don't think everyone should, is necessarily going to take to employee ownership. But if young people are saying that they want to have a say, they want to be part of something that's theirs and not pushed about by a boss, employee ownership, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there was one of the other articles that was in the Times actually saying that the self-employment isn't necessarily that panacea place to go. There can be longer hours, you don't have the same benefits. And I think what we've heard from some of the stories articulated at the conference already has been engagement of younger workforce, ability to have that voice, to innovate, to be entrepreneurial without self-bearing all the risk is a key attraction of employment with the right employer.
Our final story, and we have to have something sort of light-hearted, but it is pertinent given who we've got here ready for a selfie outside. Naked vets who left vegans, I've forgotten the last, was it? Vexed, that's the word, isn't it? Just quickly explain this, Liz, if you can, this story, if you can recall what it was about.
Okay, well, our special guest who you will have passed on your way into the auditorium here is, of course, Sean the sheep. And you have all, I'm sure, or many of you, have been avidly taking selfies with said Sean the sheep. This article is about some individuals taking photos of sheep, tipping them, a technical term. So I think it's just, be careful who you take your photos with. What angle did you have your selfie with Sean the sheep, and was it on your work phone?
Yeah, I'm hoping that nobody was using Sean the sheep to protect their modesty, Ken.
I would just like to say that I have no recollection of being photographed with that sheep. I was in Pizza Express at the time.
You've got better PR people than some of the royals. That brings us to the end of our special EOA papers review. Liz Hunter from KPMG and Ken Naismith from Computer Application Services. Thank you both. I hope it wasn't too traumatic. Thank you.